Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the Unreadable Update number 1. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, and I are going to explain. So, if you missed it at our Fundamentals of Outlining workshop, CJ and I made this wild decision that not only were we going to create an outline with you guys live on the workshop, but we were actually going to write the book that we created the outline for. And that moment looked something like this. But anyway, we decided not only were we going to outline on Monday, that not only were we going to outline this book together and show you exactly how we did that live for this webinar, but we also decided we were going to do something else. And what we're also going to do is we are going to write and publish this book. Okay. So we just showed you a book that we outlined, we planned in about a week, and we're going to write it and publish it. But to keep ourselves to a deadline, we did something also a little bit crazy. Do you want to tell them about that while I grab a couple links, CJ?
We decided to we decided to put this book on pre-order, even though we really haven't totally finished the outline yet and not started writing it at all. Because we said to ourselves, wouldn't it be cool if we could give them a pre-order link where everyone could go and possibly take a look at the Amazon page? Because we constantly sit here telling you guys, use Platter to write a book and publish it.
Now, for some context, when did we decide to do this, CJ?
I think we decided to do it the Tuesday before the webinar. So it was Tuesday during a marketing meeting, and then we had the webinar on Saturday. So it's like 5 days before.
5 days before. So yeah,
Yeah.
4 days. 4 days. Who's counting at
Who's
this
counting?
point?
Me.
Anyway, yeah, you apparently. That's good. Somebody's counting. Anyway, so we made the decision really quickly to write this book, and not only that, we wanted to put a deadline on ourselves. So we actually got a cover during that week from a cover designer. We designed one ourselves. It wasn't fabulous, but it wasn't terrible. But then we got a cover designer to come in and actually design a decent cover. CJ wrote a book blurb based on the outline that we had created so far.
Placeholder, mind you.
Placeholder.
We need to revise. We just needed something up there.
Yeah, we need to revise. We needed something up there for the pre-order. And then we put the book up for pre-order on Amazon and other retailers, several other retailers. So we'll post the link to that in the chat below in case you guys want to follow along and and purchase the book eventually, because you'll see all the process of creating it. Because we're going to do some weekly updates that are going to tell you how it's going, what's happening with it, and you guys are welcome to follow along with all that kind of stuff. So we set the date for when, CJ?
Sometime in January. The date actually eludes me because I'm in complete and total denial and have been since I said yes. So I I know you were like banking on me knowing that. Sorry.
No, it is January 25th, which means
Okay.
we are down to, we've given ourselves 23 weeks really to write this and have it edited and all that kind of stuff, which means we have to work at a pretty decent pace. With the chapters we have planned, we're thinking that'll equal about approximately 40 chapters. We're not super precise on that. And while we're doing this, so we're not just writing chapters. What else are we working on in this initial stage, CJ?
Well, since we've been teaching all about pre-writing and the story genius method as taught by Lisa Cron, we decided we're going to do some pre-writing. We're going to use the story genius template in Plotter. We're going to figure out those pre-writing scenes and really develop our characters and do all of that work beforehand. Everything that comes before the book even begins to help us in our journey towards writing this book. So basically it was one of those, practice what you preach moments. And we were like, all right, we're going to go in and we are going to use this method. We're going to have an origin scene, like the misbelief origin scene, and we're going to write it for each character. We're going to have backstory. We're going to create all of that. And so that is something that we have been working on and that we did work on before we even wrote the first chapter of anything. We wanted those misbeliefs, at least those pretty solid in our heads to help us have some context when it came to writing and moving forward. Because you've got two authors with wild imaginations, possibly low attention spans, and that can be dangerous. I'm speaking for myself, really. And so some planning needed to happen, I think.
Yes, some planning needed to happen. And I will just say that for me, that is going incredibly because I'm finding that knowing this character better and knowing the character that CJ is writing better through her pre-writing actually gets me more excited about the writing of the book. And it provides me with some valuable background as far as what is CJ thinking about this character and how does she see this character? And that helps me shape how my character then sees that character. So CJ is writing the character Harper, which is the female character in the female main character in the book, and I am writing Cameron Westbrook, who is the male character lead in the book. So CJ, tell me about how that's going for you, how that pre-writing is going.
So that was really interesting. I knew before I wrote the first chapter, I had to nail down her misbelief because I really needed to introduce a little bit of that internal conflict in the first chapter right off the bat, but I didn't know exactly what that internal conflict was going to be. So in Plotter, just in the template itself, I just wrote a really short synopsis where it was kind of like, what if she has always felt a little less than imposter syndrome, living in the shadow of her father, who is a prize-winning journalist. And, she's now a year later coming off of just a horrible, epic career crisis where she's lost everything. And now she's reporting for, really stupid things and a news outlet that's not getting her anywhere. So I just was like, what would that look like? And so I wrote that misbelief scene considering this give and take of Harper and her father, who really had not been in the book or in the planning or in the outline in any way, shape, or form before we started. And as I started to just kind of expand on that misbelief scene, for me, because I knew it wasn't going to be in the book, I don't know why, but that was a little liberating. I was like, no one will see this. Of course, we're going to show this to everybody. But in my head, I was like, no one will see this. And so I just free wrote and really enjoyed it and loved this really complicated relationship that Harper and her dad have, and just really solidified the misbelief of she does not trust herself. She does not trust her instincts. She does not trust her gut. She does not know how to read people. And that is what her father has taught her over and over again in that one origin scene. And then writing the crossroads scene, the first one, that really solidifies this idea when she finds that her informant has been killed because of her, writing that moment, even though it's not in the book, but we hint at it in the book and talk about it, solidifying that. It's interesting because it really does give you so much context. You know so many things when you do that before you ever write the first chapter. So writing the first chapter was easy and it was fun. And it's one of the few times where I've really had a super good handle on a character by chapter one, because I'm a discovery writer and I don't usually do that level of planning. So this has been fun. How about you, Troy? Sharing time. It's your turn.
Oh yeah, and so I am a loose plotter somewhat. People will be like, "Oh no, you plan everything. You're an architect." And I don't really. Usually, my scene cards are more of a writing prompt, and then I do more in the revision process. But in writing with someone else on a tighter timeline, first of all, I need to give some CJ some context for what I'm thinking. The other thing that it turns out has in common that we've learned from the backstory part of it is that both of our characters have issues with their father, right? So it's a way to solidify their relationship, even though there's other parts of their relationship that are going to be harder for them to navigate, right? So it's like, oh wow, that's something that really quickly can give them something in common to they can complain about their dads or whatever the case may be. And we don't know how that'll go yet. But also in reading CJ's writing, first of all, I get a feel for her writing style immediately, which I kind of had before, but this has really solidified it. And also, because we're working together, we have to do a little more planning than would if we were writing solo. If I was writing this book solo, I could wing it for a while, probably, and then come back and say, okay, this character is this or whatever. But then CJ would be like, well, wait, that ruins my whole scene 4 or 5 and 6. Now I have to rewrite those. And first of all, nobody wants to do that. Second of all, we don't have time for that because we set ourselves up with this deadline. So what it's doing is it's forcing us to hone in on the planning and writing process, which is actually pretty cool because that's what we say you should do with Plotter. And so we're like, well, maybe we should do what we actually say. And I love the fact I don't use all of the Story Genius stuff in my planning, but I use some of it. But I'm using more of it this time than I have other times because of collaboration, the collaborative writing thing. Anyway, so anyway, this is kind of how it's going. What we're going to do in these sessions is we're also going to share our Plotter files. So we're going to show you what this looks like in Plotter and kind of talk about some of the tools and stuff that we're using. So let me share my screen really quick, and then we'll show that to you guys. Okay, so you should all be able to see my screen now, and you can see that we've got some scenes that are blue, some scenes that are orange, and a whole bunch of them that are white. Hopefully that'll change as we go. And so this kind of represents, orange represents the fact that this scene is written. Okay, that it's been written, something's written in this scene. Okay, so if we click on Misbelief Origin of Harper, we will see that the things that we've done is we've got the Misbelief Origin. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this, CJ, and what you put in it, why you picked this way to do it?
Well, and it's funny because even with this synopsis, this really quick overview of what I had in mind for this scene, it changed when I started writing it because her voice was a little more mature and she ended up being like a senior in high school, basically. So that needs to be changed to more like 17, 18 instead of, 12. But and obviously not middle school, high school. So I need to go in and add that in there. But basically, as I was writing it, I realized the type of story that she needed to do needed to be something that had so much meat on it, was super juicy, but also something that her father did not want her to publish. And why? Because that in itself was kind of a mystery, but really pivotal to the inherent conflicts that she would have with her father. And so he berates her for this article, claiming she doesn't have enough information as to her English professor having an affair with a student. You can't make that kind of an accusation just because you have a source. Like, it'll ruin someone's life. And so I just, as I was writing it, you'll find that it's great to have a synopsis, but as you write, you discover, and as you write, you start to go, and it's that voodoo moment where voices in your head and the characters are telling you this is what's really happening. And so I had that moment where I was like, okay, maybe the mother is dealing with alcoholism because the father is a malignant narcissist. Maybe this article is something he doesn't want published because it's really not the student. Maybe it's the father having the affair with her English teacher, and she just read it all wrong, which feeds into her misbelief that she has some idea of facts and she has a sense for story and pursuing it, but she consistently reads things wrong, which is something he pushes, that idea that she's not cut out for it in this scene. And it really hits home for her that she's just not as good as her dad. She doesn't have an instinct for story or a gut for news. Because sure, her English teacher's having an affair, but she was about to ruin that woman's life by accusing her of statutory rape when in reality, the affair is with her dad. So she's got an inkling of issues, but it's not quite developed yet. And instead of her father developing all of that, he berates her because he got caught doing something he shouldn't have. And he doesn't sit there and see her potential. And so that feeds into this misbelief that she's going to be battling throughout the book. But this was a super cool scene to write. It was a lot of fun. So, and then the link to that document is in the scene itself so that it's easier for all of us to find it. So.
Exactly. And so the link to that document, we keep it in the scene card essentially because we're sharing a folder and we're sharing documents within that are outside of the manuscript, but related to the manuscript. So we're doing that in a Google folder. We also have images and stuff like that in there. We haven't done character images yet. We probably will at some point once we figure out what these people look like.
I should figure that out.
Which is still a work in progress, but that's okay. We've got some of them nailed down a little bit, stuff like that. But anyway, and the same thing goes for Westbrook is essentially I put a really short description here. I'll probably actually edit and expand this a little bit. But essentially my thought process was, and this came to me the other night in the middle of the night. So of course I got up and wrote it down because there's something wrong with me, seriously. But anyway, whatever. And so basically he was an ex-football player, but he's not the ex-football player you would think he is. We're not talking the big hunk guy. This guy was a kicker, but he was headed to the NFL because he knew the NFL always needs kickers. And kickers are the ones that, like, they're quietly recruited. They're usually not high in the draft, but they're a really vital member of the team. And he's an exceptional college kicker. And then he gets injured in the final game of his senior year, and his NFL dreams are derailed. And essentially, his father comes in and tells him while he's in the hospital, hey, by the way, you got to stay in the hospital for another day because we're all busy. So we can't be home to take care of you. So we'll pick you up in the morning. And also, your NFL career is over, and you should just join the family business and work for me and go and get your master's, and everything will be fine. Which is fine. All of that was fine. But his best friend, whose name is Jordan, comes in and tries to convince him that, hey, maybe being in your dad's employ is not such a bad idea. Maybe we can team up and do some pretty cool stuff. And so it kind of sets the groundwork for the fact that, first of all, he works with his best friend from high school, which shows up in the actual book. And it gives a little bit of backstory, not only for Cameron, but for Jordan as well, and for his father, who is the boss of basically an organized crime organization, but also a congressman. And so we're exploring that as well. Now, what's also interesting, so anyway, so that's that one. Then there's another crossroads scenes with Harper. We won't go super in depth with this because there's also going to be one with Westbrook from his point of view of this particular event. But essentially, she finds her informant's body when she's working on a big story, which is a big turning point in her life. And we'll save more details on that for later on. But some of these crossroad scenes and these misbelief origin scenes, we'll be publishing those somewhere. We haven't decided exactly where yet, so that you guys can look at those and understand what we're doing with the backstory of these characters. We're not going to post the manuscript as we go along, although we might give you details about what we've written. But we have one document, one shared document that is the manuscript itself. And so there are two chapters written in that. But this one, I'm going to kind of give CJ like a half because this one's sort of written, but it needs to be revised. So why don't you tell us about that, CJ?
This scene is actually the very original scene that I wrote in 2017 when I had this idea of a journalist waking up in the morning completely hungover, can't remember what happened the night before because she was blackout drunk, and she's got this horrible tattoo on her shoulder and doesn't know how she got it. So this was the premise, guys. This was what we had to work with when Troy and I decided to jump off of this, and into this adventure of writing together. It was just this. And so I took the first two chapters that I thought were salvageable and brought it to Troy and said, what do you think? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. So, but we revamped it a bit to where tattoo, that first chapter is now going to be the third chapter. And we know so much more now. The bones of it are good. The scene itself is going to be okay, but a lot of little details and things need to change, and certain rhythms and pacing needs to change because my writing has changed a little bit since then. And also the details of what's happening to Harper and who she is were things that I did not know in 2017. So I'm going to go in and basically rewrite this chapter, keeping the bones of it, but fixing the more granular details so that it fits in with all of the pre-writing that Troy and I have done. And that's going to be
Oh,
fun. I'm doing that tomorrow. Woo-hoo.
ooh, yeah, and this is gonna be super fun because now we know so much more information, and we figured out that information in the matter of just a couple of weeks of working together on this outline and not working on it like we do other things. Like we're busy people, but we've taken the time to work with each other and learn about this backstory. Now we've also taken the time to do some research, so I'll show you in our notes section. We've got a couple other things that we need to research, but one of them we researched was, can you tattoo with ink only visible under black light or a UV light? Now, the reason we did this is because that's part of the whole tattoo story, and without giving too much away, but the tattoo is more than it seems in two vital vital but different ways. Okay. And if you saw our outlining workshop, you may know what those ways are, but we're not going to go into super detail. But you can tattoo with just ultraviolet light. Now, they're more uncommon than regular tattoos. There's some concerns over the safety of UV ink versus traditional ink. And if you get it out in the sun too much, it can actually do weird things on your body. So just to let you know that. But if you want to learn more about that, we had a link here where you can learn more about those tattoos. And maybe we'll post that in the description of this video below as well. Also, we learned in the background, in the background story for Cameron, I had to do some research on Kyle Field, which is where he played football, fictionally. And so I had to know some things about that field to make that scene actually accurate. And even though it's a backstory scene that no one will ever see, even though we're sharing these with everyone, as CJ said, I wanted the information to be as true and realistic as possible. Okay. But the other thing that we had, and we're definitely going to share this link, is, and I'm just going to share this as this is a research rabbit hole. So actually, first of all, why don't you tell me why I did this, CJ? Tell people why I did this.
So
So
when you are creating, when you're doing pre-writing, what you'll find is that the more you write, the more questions you end up having for yourself that you realize you need to answer. And those questions are good because they are details that are necessary to move the story along and to fill in the blanks of what you are trying to accomplish. So we had this fuzzy idea that, the Westbrooks were crooked. They had a chain of hotels and that there was some kind of, white collar crime occurring, but didn't really know what it was. And so I asked myself, I actually gave myself a list of possible things. And the thing I kept circling back to was it's got to be money laundering, but I don't know why, because I don't know a lot about money laundering. For some reason, the process has never made sense to me because I'm just like, you take money in and then you have more money come out. One and one do not make two in this instance. So I went to Troy and I said, I feel like this is something we could do, but I don't understand how it works. So I need your expertise on this. And Troy's like, yes, my expertise in money laundering. Super. I'll get right on that. So he did give us some examples or give me some examples and wrote an entire blog post on money laundering and how it can be, used. It was basically money laundering for dummies like me. And then he made it really easy to understand and then talked about how you can utilize that within a book as an author. So I just thought we got to use this. This is what it is. And then we need to figure out the hows of it. Do they have a casino? What are they doing? Are they overpricing and over invoicing? So these are things we're looking into. But Troy, it was like, how long is this blog post?
it's close to 3,000 words. So this is,
Yeah.
I can tell you that, obviously as a full-time writer, I have maybe more time on my hands to do some of this research than other people, but also I knew what sources to go to get some of this information. Some of the basics I knew, but some of the other resources I knew where to go to find out the kind of information and explain it in a way basically that CJ could understand, but in a lot of ways that any writer could understand. So instead of just sharing it with CJ, I made it into a blog post. It's on my website. We'll link to it down in the comments in the description below this video so that you guys can go check that out just in case you're ever writing a book about money laundering or you come into a whole bunch of illegal money and you're not sure what to do with it. But
Right.
I'm not going to endorse you using it for that method because there's also things in there about how criminals get caught. And the reason that's important is obviously for this story to work, the Westbrooks have to get caught. Okay. And one of the ways that it works is if you have a human informant that's letting you know how the business is doing the money laundering. Okay. And we'll probably talk about that in a future blog post as well when we talk about how FBI informants actually work and how that process actually works, or if you're any kind of informant, how that process works. Right. And so that's just one of the ways that criminals get caught is somebody tells on them. Okay. And because people is the weakest link in any money laundering scheme. But by doing this research, it also gave me some ideas of how the hotel can be using things like crypto and invoicing and other ways that the hotel could be using modern means, which really brings us into a more of today's world type story by using those modern means to show how a business would use those to launder money and how that could trip them up and they could potentially get caught. So anyway, so it was really valuable. It was really fun to write. So we just wrote that. But anyway, which you don't necessarily have to do that, but doing thorough research is really important and understanding your subject matter because it was not only necessary for me to understand it as the one writing the Westbrook role, but it's also important for CJ to understand it, to understand how they're going to get caught and things that her reporter can discover that will lead her to the fact that they're money laundering, right? And so this stuff is really important as we go throughout the story, and having a reference at easy reach is also really important. And this is why we put it in our notes in Plotter, so that if CJ has a question, even if she doesn't have this up on her browser, she can come in to the note section of our Plotter file, click on the link, and go down the rabbit hole of figuring out how she's going to write this scene based on the information that we already have from our research. So it allows it all to be in one spot. She doesn't have to go Google on her own or go to Quora or Reddit or whatever and find out some wild stuff that might be happening there, get a Tor browser and get on the dark web or anything like that. So
Oh, the
anyway,
dark web sounds so exciting.
you use it
I just
every
wanted to do
day. Just to let you know, maybe I should do a blog post about that, how it
that.
works.
You
But
should.
if you log into your banking information using your credentials, as soon as you're inside that portal, you're on the dark web.
Yeah, really? I did not. Okay. Just
Yeah,
learned
the dark
something
web is really just websites and stuff that are not, now there's more to it than that, but it's
right.
websites that are not indexed by Google. So your main bank's website is indexed by them, but the page that you see once you log in is not indexed by Google. So
Did
technically
not
you're on
know
the dark
that.
web.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's the smaller everyday version of the dark web. But anyway, okay. That's another, oh my goodness, we'll just have
The
another
rabbit
research thing.
holes.
Anyway, but this is where we are right now this week, and we'll be posting updates on a regular basis, maybe weekly, maybe every couple weeks, depending upon how things are going, to show you guys what we're doing, what our progress looks like, different tools that we're using to share information with each other, and we'll just keep you in the loop with what we're doing. Okay. So thanks everybody for joining us. We appreciate you following our journey with this. It's going to be super fun. You can watch collaboration in real time. Hopefully we won't have any fights on screen. And you never know. But anyway, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you in our next update.
Bye, guys.